So I'm going to talk to you first of all about what's going on nutritionally at menopause and what we need to consider. But it's important to say, in 20 years of working with women at menopause, never has a woman come to me to talk about any of those things. The only thing women come to talk to me about is this. And I will help you understand, first of all, why this happens to so many women during perimenopause and menopause. But some of the things up here are really important for you to understand the connection with nutrition, because things like cardiovascular disease, your bone health, even cancer prevention, digestive health, all of these things are really relying on great nutrition, on foods from all of the food groups to really support your health. And that's why there is no place here for fads and gimmicks. But also, some of these health risks that come with menopause are affected by the thing that troubles most women. So things like the metabolic syndrome, you might have heard of that. That's not a disease, it's just a collection of markers that your doctors might measure that tell you that your lifestyle really isn't serving you very well. Things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, where you're carrying your weight if it's around your tummy. And these are markers that suggest that things like diabetes and heart disease might be a problem for you further down the line. But the beauty is, everything that we'll talk about tonight can cover all of these different things. So we can still work to your agenda, managing the weight and looking after all of these other aspects as well. So let's normalize what's going on. At least half of women, and I think it's probably more, will gain weight during their perimenopause. On average, it's 1.5 kilos or 3 pounds for every year of the perimenopause. And if we think perimenopause might be 5, 6, 7, even 10 years of your life, it's not unusual for a woman to gain 10 kilos, 21 pounds, that's a dress size, over that period of perimenopause. But it doesn't have to be this way. The pattern of the weight means it's all around here. Often you might not change shape significantly, you might not change weight significantly, but your shape changes. Women are always telling me, all of a sudden my bra doesn't fit, my blouse doesn't fit, jackets, skirts, everything doesn't fit because this central weight gain. And this is nasty fat. This is the sort of brown, we call it visceral fat. It wraps around your internal organs. It's different from the sort of fat that you gain when you're 20. It's the type of fat that is linked with other sorts of disease. That's why we have to really try and tackle it. And you can. Yes. Well, as we understand it, Men don't have a hormonal menopause, but actually what's really interesting, let me just show you the next slide. All through your life, estrogen has given you that hourglass figure. Even if you've been heavy, estrogen gives you a nipped-in waist, the female shape. And when you hit perimenopause and your estrogen levels reduce, you start to lay fat down like a man. So I've always been straight up and down, sometimes even slightly outweigh a little bit. I have battled with my weight all of my life, but that's essentially what happens. And this is why very often the risk factors for other diseases that women were previously protected against increase to the same level as a man's, particularly heart disease. But I want you to think about all of these different aspects, because together, for me, this makes a perfect storm for weight gain. And if you understand why it happens, you can really do something about it. Great. Right. So the first thing, estrogen. That gift, it just keeps giving, doesn't it? Every session you've heard about estrogen. Estrogen doesn't make you fat, or the loss of estrogen doesn't make you fat. It just changes where the fat goes. So before menopause, it would be here and here, bust and hips. Now it starts to become here. The thing that is really impacting your potential to gain weight is this, the metabolic change that happens. So your body is made up largely of fat tissue and lean tissue, your muscle. As we all age, we begin to lose muscle tissue. Muscle tissue processes the calories that go in. If you lose muscle, you need fewer calories. And unless you change your diet or do more exercise, you cannot do anything other than gain weight. And we also think and know that other things are going on at menopause. You might find that you were talking about some of the symptoms, that you're a bit more stressed. And when you're stressed, you hold on to fat. The other things, though, that happens, all those symptoms you might have to deal with can leave you feeling rotten. And when you feel rotten, do you really want to go to the gym? Do you really want to go out walking? Do you really want to do all the things you were doing perhaps before? What you might prefer to do is stay in, watch Netflix, eat dairy milk, and drink wine, beer, tea. Yeah. Okay, great. So without consciously changing your diet, just what's going on can often mean it begins to change. And that's where we start to focus on what can you do about it. There isn't a menopause diet. The answers are right under your nose. And the first thing we need to do is really start to look at what they might be. There's lots of figures on here. I don't want you to worry about those. But the reason, we know the reason why most people in the UK, we're one of the fattest nations on earth. And the reason that most of us struggle with our weight is really simple. We don't eat enough fruit and vegetables. We drink too much alcohol. We eat too much fat. We eat too much sugar, and we don't move enough. I would also add to that, we eat much more, bigger portions than we ever need. And I can see lots of nodding. That's really familiar. This is where we start to look. If I asked you to do, and if you were working with me in one of a group program, you would all do a food and an activity diary for me. And I guarantee all of you would probably find something in here that isn't quite right. And that would be where we look to start to make a change. So nothing fancy, no celebrity diet, common sense, things we know, but it starts to make sense that actually it's worth doing now because you're not going to get away with it anymore. And that's the thing again with menopause. Maybe you got away with it when you were 30. But those changes in hormones, that change in metabolism, just means you can't get away with it now. If we start to see that one or two of those issues are the thing, the great thing is you don't have to be perfect to turn that around. You just have to be a bit better. So I am not interested in perfection. Perfection is dull. And I like to be dirty. So you can still eat chocolate. You can still eat crisps. You can still have a glass of wine. We just need to clean it up a little bit. And so the things to look at to change are, first of all, meal structure. So many women I see go for long, long periods without eating. And when you do that, it can feel as if you're doing something really good. I'm starving myself. But we see from clinical trials and from all of my experience that you will always make up for that later on. And you'll probably have much bigger meals. You'll possibly start grazing on, you know, that cupboard you've got where you keep those things that you don't really eat all the time, but I've got one with peanuts, with crisps, with chocolate in, and you can start grazing on those. And once you do, the floodgates open. So the first thing to focus on is really eating regularly. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. I really like snacks as well. They don't have to be huge. These can be snacks with 2 food groups. So something like 2 crackers and a little Baby Bell cheese, or an apple and some peanut butter. So you've got protein and vegetables, carbohydrate and protein together, nutrient dense snacks, not empty snacks like crisps and chocolate. I spend a lot of time talking about food groups. I'm not, again, interested in good and bad foods. You can eat anything you want. But when it comes to your dinner and your lunch and your breakfast, try to think about 3 food groups and imagine your plate divided into 4 quarters. We want to see 1 quarter protein. That's meat, fish, chicken, nuts, eggs, tofu. 1 quarter carbohydrate, bread, rice, chapati, naan bread, couscous, bulgur wheat, potatoes. And half of that plate, fruit, vegetables, or salad. That will always keep the balance of the nutrients right. it will always keep you satisfied, and it will always keep the energy level, the calorie value about right. The next phase, though, can be tough. So we've balanced those food groups. Now we need to think about the portion size. When you go home tonight, look at your plates. Nowadays, they're huge. Generally, the thing to work on here is your first helping of food. You've split your food groups. Now let's look at the whole portion of food fitting into your cupped hands. Have a look at your hands. So this is your first helping. Not much. This is about the amount of food that will fill your stomach. That's the whole plate of food. Yeah, you might find it's easy to move to a smaller plate to begin with. Now, before you hit me, I am just going to say, what I want you to do, though, is when you have that, is to sit down at a table, if you've got one, or a breakfast bar, no TV, no phone, no iPad, and try to eat mindfully. And by mindfully, you've heard of mindfulness. Most of us eat mindlessly. We're concentrating on other things, shoveling food in. We don't even register, I'm satisfied. And most of the time, if you haven't eaten properly throughout the day, you eat until you're stuffed. Like Sunday lunch every day. What I want you to do is eat regularly, take a modest amount, eat slowly, and then judge how you feel. And do you feel satisfied? And all satisfied is no longer hungry. It isn't stuffed. And sometimes you'll think, no, I'm still hungry. That's a different feeling from thinking, that was really tasty and I want some more. If you want some more because it was tasty, have it for lunch tomorrow. But if you are still hungry, go and have some more. It's a very different way than putting on your plate what your eyes think you want to eat. And particularly if you live with teenage boys or adult men, you will probably give yourself the same amount of food as them, and you don't need it. This part is probably the hardest thing to do. But I promise you, if you can work on that, your portion sizes will reduce significantly. And to achieve a weight loss, if that's what you need, of around a half to a pound a week, you only need to save 400 to 500 calories a day. If your portion sizes are too big and you reduce them a little at breakfast, at lunch and at dinner, that's easy without changing. Does that start to make sense? And is that a little bit of a breath of fresh air that we're not talking about cutting foods out? You might have, what have I got next? Oh yes, I'll come back to that in a sec. Just a word on carbohydrate. A lot of women are really frightened to eat carbohydrates. But do you remember I said to you, you're losing muscle? And that's one of the reasons your calorie requirements are falling. Mel came to speak to you about doing exercise. And doing exercise is the most important thing you can do to start to speed your metabolic rate back up, particularly strength exercise. And it doesn't matter if you've never done it before. I know Mel will have given you some great advice. I'll talk to you a little bit about where you can do classes with my group as well, where you will be working with women who haven't exercised since they were at school. But if you haven't eaten carbohydrate and you're trying to exercise to build muscle, it will be like trying to drive a car without petrol. And your body will use your own muscle to make energy, to give you the energy to do the exercise that you're trying to do to build more muscle. It's totally counterproductive. So if anyone tells you to do a low carbohydrate diet for menopause, tell them to do one. Good. Now, if it was only as easy as I just described, that would be wonderful. But to do this properly and to build a lifestyle plan that you will still be doing when you're 85, we need to look at some other things as well. I won't talk too much about exercise. Mel's done that. I don't know about you. We all have emotional relationships with food. We eat when we're sad, when we're lonely, when we're bored, when we're tired. And if you haven't slept because of menopause, it's really likely these things will come into play. But those are learned behaviors. Nobody was born with a preference for dairy milk. We learn that and we practice it time and time and time again. And if you want to build a lifestyle plan that's going to last you forever, you're going to need to change some of those behaviors. And that's hard too. Really hard, but totally possible. But in order to start doing this amount of effort, this does take effort, you have really got to feel good. And if you're struggling with symptoms, you must get those addressed first. But I really promise you, I can help you, other people can help you do this if you're on your A game. And three things we also need to think about. Women between 40 and 60 are the group of people drinking more alcohol at an increasing rate that give us most concern in the UK. So if that is something you rely on, maybe to sleep or to relax, that is going to have to be addressed. Every gram of alcohol gives you 7 calories. Every gram of fat gives you 9 calories. Every gram of carbohydrate. So sorry.
Nigel,
Am I going too fast?
Yeah, can we go back to the
every gram of alcohol is 7 calories. Every gram of fat is 9 calories. But every gram of carbohydrate or protein is just 4 calories. So that glass of wine, just to help you wind down, is really calorie laden with no nutritional value at all. 21st century living without menopause is stressful. So we talked about yoga earlier. We talk about mindfulness, meditation. Stress management is an essential part of your toolkit for diet, weight loss, menopause, the whole shebang.